How would you like a 15% discount to my daily email, the stack of stuff, the show notes, discounts to the conference, all of that? All you need to do is text the word show to 33777. You'll get the annual subscription with a 15% discount to my daily email. You'll get the stack of stuff, the links to the show notes, discounts to the conference, and so much more. All you have to do is text the word show, SHOW, to 33777. Text show to 33777.
Welcome to the Eric Erickson Show podcast, Hour 1.
Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, welcome. It is Eric Erickson here across the nation. The phone number is 877-973-7425. If you want to be on the program, I would love to have you with me. As always, text Eric, E-R-I-C-K, to 33777, and you can get the show notes, the live stream, the podcast, social media links, whatever. Wall-to-wall coverage on the TV networks about the today in the Trump trial. David Pecker of National Enquirer on the stand. I don't care. And I'm believing, we'll get to this in a little while, the data is beginning to suggest that the media is about to move on from this too. Why? Because it's making Trump more popular. Yes, we'll get to that. But first, got to get to the addendum, the follow-up to yesterday. I began my show yesterday pointing out that the very first two words uttered by Joseph Robinette Biden when he ran for president of the United States in 2019, the first two words were Charlottesville, Virginia, by design. Because Joe Biden has said repeatedly he made up his mind to run for office after the 2017 Tiki Torch White rally in Charlottesville, Virginia, where one person got killed, and Donald Trump condemned the white nationalists, and then about the rest of the protesters said there were very fine people on both sides. Those opposed, those supporting, it got conflated. Donald Trump was saying there were very fine people on both sides of the white supremacy debate. What's so notable to me, interestingly, when Donald Trump said that, is that out of the gate, much of the media accurately captured what he said, but within 48 hours begun to spin it that he was actually saying there were very fine people on both sides of the racism debate. The racists were very fine people as well. They denounced him. And it has come ever since to be the belief, although that's not what he actually meant, but that Donald Trump said there were very fine people on both sides. Fine people being the white nationalists. Well, Joe Biden, I said yesterday, needed to rise to the occasion, and without caveat, without both siding this, he needed to condemn what's going on college campuses around the country. MSNBC and Joy Reid, not an intellectually honest person, she's going overtime, as are others in these networks like MSNBC, trying to justify what happened on the college campuses. This is Joy Reid last night on her program.
While massive protests for a free Palestine have been unfolding on the campus of Columbia University, where tensions have exploded over the protests and allegations of anti-Semitism. The New York Police Department has built up a large presence around Columbia, and Columbia's president, Nemat Minouche Shafiq, has shifted the campus to remote learning following a weekend of demonstrations. More than 100 people were arrested over the last several days after the university asked police to break up a tent encampment students had set up on its south lawn.
Now, she's trying to claim that this is peaceful, and in fact, she had on Columbia protesters claiming that it was peaceful.
No, I was there yesterday, and it was very peaceful and very moving. One of the institutions affiliated with Columbia, of course, is Union Theological Seminary, and the Union students held its Sunday worship service and served communion there on the campus, even to those beyond the gates who couldn't get in. So this betrays the imagery of there being violent rhetoric spewed. I will say this, I do have a colleague whose daughter is a freshman at Barnard, and she has faced some harassment. But as Mariam said, these are outliers. And in the movement, we've always had
It happened at Black Lives Matter rally.
Yeah,
The outliers. If someone stood outside Joy Reid's home with a bullhorn and repeatedly uttered the N-word, do you think Joy Reid would find that peaceful? Joy Reid calls this peaceful. They're chanting death to the Jews from river to sea. They are funded by pro-Palestinian groups, including Students for Justice in Palestine. You know, these kids do not have the wherewithal, the means, or the opportunity to spontaneously show up in the middle of the night with brand new tents bought from REI. Isn't that funny? This sort of organic movement, they just all of a sudden have these brand new tents from REI. Where do you think they got them from? Students for Justice in Palestine is one of the groups that is responsible for these peaceful events, and they have an eliminationist position on Israel. This is their statement, quote, "Liberation is not an abstract concept. It is not a moment circumscribed to a revolutionary past, as it is often characterized. Rather, liberating colonized land is a real process that requires confrontation by any means necessary. In essence, decolonization is a call to action, a commitment to the restoration of indigenous sovereignty. It calls upon us to engage in meaningful actions that go beyond symbolism and rhetoric. Resistance comes in all forms: armed struggle, general strike, popular demonstration. All of it is legitimate, all of it necessary." But wait, there's more. There's another Palestinian organization as well involved, WOL, and it says that it wants the abolition of Zionism, which means the abolition of the Jewish state. Quote, "We defend the right of Palestinians as colonized people to resist the Zionist occupation by any means necessarily," and quote, "rejects all collaboration and dialogue with Zionist organizations as normalization." Columbia University's president is under fire from the right because a clip has surfaced from just after 9/11 where she said some people view terrorism as another form of popular resistance. Now, I'm not playing you the audio or bringing up her video because I saw the whole clip and she's actually being taken out of context. And I think as a matter of intellectual honesty, I need to point out, yes, she said that there are those who believe that terrorism is just a form of popular resistance. But she makes very clear this isn't her view. She's explaining the view of people in the Middle East, particularly in Palestinian territories, that they believe that terrorism is a form of resistance. And she's right in that. She doesn't believe it. She recognizes they believe it, which is probably why she's trying to crack down as she is on campus and not going far enough. She should go further because she knows this, if not resign herself, given the disgrace that's happened on her campus. But she's not defending terrorism as resistance. She's just noting some people do, and that's an accurate statement. What's baffling to me, however, is that confronted with all this, confronted with the organizations funding this, confronted with the claims that this is peaceful when it's not. I mean, they're literally saying Al-Qassam, kill more Jews. Al-Qassam is the terrorist wing of Hamas that orchestrated October 7th. So what happens at the White House? Joe Biden invites Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez to come speak.
It is especially important that we remember the power of young people shaping this country today, of all days, as we once again witness the leadership of those peaceful student-led protests on campuses like Columbia, Yale, Berkeley, and many others.
Notice she emphasizes peaceful. She emphasizes peaceful. There's nothing peaceful about these with bullhorns, with human chains blocking Jews from campus, blocking professors from campus, blocking Jews from dormitories, harassing Jews. This is not a peaceful protest. These are the same people who, before the burned buildings in Waukesha, Wisconsin, could say it's a mostly peaceful protest. Remember, the left believes that words construct reality. So if they call it peaceful when it's violent, it's peaceful because the words construct reality, not what you see, not your senses. It's the words that construct reality. And you need to understand this. This is why, with a straight face, they say it's peaceful. They lie, but in their lying, they're trying to redefine peace. So Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez calls these peaceful protesters, and we need to stand with the students. What does Joe Biden do when he comes up after she speaks?
Passover begins at sundown tonight.
Come on, we don't want to hear Joy Reid.
Representative Ocasio-Cortez in New York, I learned a long time ago, listen to that lady. Listen to that lady. We're going to talk more about another part of the world, too, real quickly.
Listen to that lady. She says they're peaceful protesters and we should support them. And Joe Biden says we should listen to that lady. He was explicitly asked shortly thereafter about condemning the anti-Semitism, and Joe Biden meets the moment and falls on his face. He has this very fine people on both sides moment.
And the anti-Semitic protests on college campuses.
I condemn the anti-Semitic protests. That's why I've set up a program to deal with that. I also condemn those who don't understand what's going on with the Palestinians and how they're being.
Should the Columbia University president resign?
Right this way. I didn't know that. I'll have to find out more about it.
Very fine people on both sides. I condemn the anti-Semitism, and I condemn the people who don't know what's going on with the Palestinian people. I'm sorry, Mr. President. The Palestinian people are not the ones being harassed on college campuses. The Palestinian people do not have to have armed guards to show up on the campuses of Columbia and Harvard and Yale and Barnard, Stanford, Duke. The president could have forcefully condemned what's happening on these college campuses. He could have rebuked people like Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez who are claiming these are peaceful protests. But he chose not to because Joe Biden needs the votes of the anti-Semites. Joe Biden wants the votes of the anti-Semites. For all of the talk on the left about Donald Trump and the racists, Joe Biden is relying on some very racist people to get him into office. Joe Biden is relying on violent people to get him into office. Their criticisms of Donald Trump are projection. Again, Donald Trump's superpowers, he makes people who don't like him behave in the ways they claim that he behaves. Donald Trump, they say, coddles racists. Here's Joe Biden coddling racists. Donald Trump's base is violent and anti-Semitic. Here's Joe Biden's base, violent and anti-Semitic. Joe Biden could have risen to the occasion. Joe Biden could have denounced Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez calling these peaceful protests. Joe Biden could have rebutted all of it. And the Democrats, they're on TV. My buddy Paul Begall, I like Paul, but Paul's on TV saying, Joe Biden's met the moment. He's condemned. He hasn't really condemned. When you're both sides in it, I condemn anti-Semitism, and I condemn Islamophobia as well. You're not really condemning what's happening on these college campuses. When you're saying these are peaceful protests and they're out there chanting death to the Jews, I challenge you to defend someone standing on a street corner with a bullhorn saying death to the N-word. I dare you to do that, to say that that's peaceful. I assure you that's not peaceful. And yet the Democrats will claim that violence is peace and peace is violence. They say words mean things and then just say their words. They're caught in the moment. They're caught in the gap of their own illogical beliefs of the progressive ideology. Progressivism doesn't make any sense. It is insane. They've decided that they must redefine language and words, and they've co-opted the President of the United States of America, who's always been on the wrong side of every issue for 50 years. Now he's on the wrong side of the anti-Semites. He's with them and not with Israel. He's with the Hamas supporters and not the Jews. At a time of growing anti-Semitism in the United States, you would think Joe Biden could give a speech against anti-Semitism, saying that calling for Al-Qassam on college campuses to kill more Jews isn't peaceful, saying river to sea is actually a call for genocide. It's not peaceful, saying these, but he won't say it. He won't say it because he needs these people's votes. All of the criticisms the left levels against Donald Trump are more and more exposed as opportunism. They don't really believe it. They just level the accusation. If anything, Joe Biden is the Democrats' Donald Trump, and they will excuse and defend everything he does and hate the comparison. But if Donald Trump were in the face of something like this to condemn both sides, they'd attack him. If Donald Trump were explicit in condemning racism, they'd attack him. They have different rules for Donald Trump and Joe Biden. The media itself has different rules, and those rules are enabling Donald Trump to come back to power because they're so desperate to stop him, they refuse to hold Joe Biden accountable, and more of the public realizes they can't trust what the media says. The fact of the matter is The anti-Semitic protesters on these college campuses are violent in their rhetoric, in their calls for genocide and the destruction of the Jews, all while hiding behind claims that Israel itself is committing genocide when it is not. Joe Biden could have risen to the occasion. Instead, he got in the gutter with the anti-Semites whose votes he wants for re-election. Hello and welcome. It is Eric Erickson here. The phone number, 877-973-7425. If you want to be on the program. Since October 7th and the attack on Israel by Hamas, it has been increasingly apparent the Washington Post has become a PR engine for terrorism and should probably be treated as such. The Washington Post, you will recall, has run a number of stories fawning over Gaza, the Palestinians, and Hamas, deeply critical of Israel, questioning aspects of the war that turned out to be true that made Hamas look bad. Had a number of reporters and editorial position employees who complained the newspaper was too friendly to Israel, even as it wasn't. Now they're running this tweet. Let me read you this tweet. Students protested against the Israel-Gaza war continued to be met by police on Monday night as the NYPD cleared a New York University encampment and students barricaded themselves inside a building at California State Polytechnic University following dozens of arrests at Yale University. And then the follow-up tweet. University campuses across the country have seen an uptick in anti-war demonstrations. These are not anti-war demonstrations. These are anti-Jew demonstrations. They have ignored the fact that Jewish students are being harassed. They've ignored the fact that Jewish students are being chased off campus, that human chains have been formed to prevent them from getting inside their dormitories. The Washington Post completely covers up, ignores the anti-Semitism. Democracy dies in the darkness, says the Washington Post, which has chosen to allow anti-Semitism to fester in the darkness, just like pre-war Germany. The Washington Post might as well be a Lenny Revenstall or whatever her name was led publication. They are allowing the anti-Semites and the terrorists to dominate the sympathies of their coverage, and you shouldn't forget it. Now, Hillsdale College has been raising the alarm about the rise of anti-Semitism and how it's a canary in the coal mine for bad things. And it just they bring you an imprimis every month. The leading conservative thought from around the nation. A lot of it originates in speeches on campus at Hillsdale. And I would highly encourage you to get for free imprimis from Hillsdale College. All you do is go to ericforhillsdale.com, ERICK, ericforhillsdale.com. If you go to ericforhillsdale.com and you sign up and get imprimis, it comes free to your mailbox, and it is intellectual stimulation every single month. They deliver just some of the greatest thoughts from some of the great conservative leaders in the country, like Chris Rufo, Heather McDonald, Victor Davis Hanson, and more. And you can get it completely for free. It's part of Hillsdale College's education mission. They want to educate voters about what is happening in the world and in the thoughts of conservatives around the country. Eric, ERICK, ericforhillsdale.com. You go to the website, you put in your information, you get it for free. You never pay a penny for imprimis at ericforhillsdale.com. Go sign up, subscribe today. Greetings, conversationalists. Welcome. It is Eric Erickson here. The phone number 877-973-7425. I got to commend Scott Galloway, a progressive professor at Columbia, and Joe Scarborough for a conversation they had this morning on Morning Joe. It's making some data points that people at MSNBC needed to hear. And I commend them for having this conversation and want you to hear it.
One of my pet peeves seems to be one of your pet peeves, and that is, 2 million people have been killed in the Sudan civil war. I haven't seen a protest at NYU for that. Assad killed 500 Arabs. I didn't see colleges burned down. 500,000 Arabs killed by Assad. Saddam Hussein killed over 1 million Muslims in wars. I gassed them. I didn't see protests there. And yet your school is shut down right now because Israel is responding to the worst attack against Jews worldwide since the Holocaust. Help us sort through that.
And we can debate that response.
I don't know algebra, but I'm pretty good at the common denominators here. and why there's no common denominators in all of these. It's just that it's Jews defending their homeland. Because if you look at the numbers, even with American wars, they don't add up.
Well, first off, good to be with you, and I especially appreciate your leadership on this issue. I'll give you some more numbers. 2,200 American servicemen killed at Pearl Harbor. We go on to kill 3.5 million Japanese, including 100,000 in one night. 2,800 Americans in 9/11. We go on to kill 400,000 people in Afghanistan and Iraq. We weren't accused of genocide. You had, if Mexico had elected a jihadist cartel to run their country, and then they incurred into Texas, and on a per capita basis killed 35,000 people, or the population of the University of Texas, and on the way back took the freshman class at SMU hostage and hid them under tunnels, what would we do? It'd be the great Sonora radioactive parking lot. But Jews are not allowed, and Israel is not allowed to prosecute a war. And they are prosecuting a war more humanely than we have done. The ratio of combatants to civilians is, of civilian death to combatant mortality is lower than it was in Mosul, lower than it was in Japan, lower than it was in Germany. So there's just a different standard for Jews in Israel when it comes to prosecuting a war. They're allowed to fight back to a truce, but unlike America or any other Western nation that has attacked this viciously, they're not allowed to win a war. It's a double standard.
Yeah. That's a point that people on MSNBC need to hear. Kudos to them for raising the issue, because he's right. I have pointed this out repeatedly, and it doesn't get enough attention. I mean, it is actually a fact. It's not a debatable fact that what Israel is doing is actually better than what others have done. It's not a debatable fact. It's not a point in contention. It's just the truth that Israel has done a better job minimizing civilian casualties in Gaza than the United States did during any part of World War II or in much of the Iraq War, including in Mosul or in Kabul. Israel has done a better job than the Russians in Ukraine. Israel has done a much better job mitigating casualties. Normally, the ratio of civilian to military death in urban warfare is 5-1. Israel is 2-1. Much better odds of being a civilian in Gaza than in plenty of other wars. Israel doesn't get credit for that. Israel should get credit for that. But it's not going to, because, as Scott Galloway said on MSNBC, Israel's held to a different standard from anyone else. I mean, again, to his hypothetical, imagine what would happen if the Mexican cartels came across the border and took hostages. Let's say Baylor. They went to Baylor. They captured, I mean, per capita wise, it would amount to about the same number of the freshman class at Baylor, and took them back across the border. What do you think we would do to the cartels and those who harbored the cartels? What do you think we would do? But Israel is held to a different standard. Israel is held to a higher standard. Israel is held to an impossible standard, and it's designed to be impossible so they can always be the bad guy. Heads, they lose. Tails, you win when it comes to Israel and the left. They deserve a lot more credit than they're getting. Now, I have spent a lot of time on this issue. It has been in the news, but I am actually in the news today as well, and obviously I am my favorite subject to talk about. If you subscribe to the daily email, you would get a link to the piece I authored at National Review. And I need to spend a few minutes with you on this. There is some weird movement happening within conservatism where a lot of people who were conservative suddenly aren't, and they don't want to give up the name conservative. They want to redefine what conservatism is, and I think that's a bad thing. Limited government and free markets are a good thing, and yet we have a number of people and conservative think tanks in Washington, D.C. now who want government control. They want their government to control it. Now, I need you to understand the problem here. You got to understand this problem, and it's not a hard one to understand. If you limit the size and scope of the federal government, it makes it harder for big government to do things. If instead you decide that you want to be in charge of the government and use the government for your purposes, you're going to set precedents that the other side will use when they come to power. And ultimately, there's no such thing as a permanent political majority in the United States of America. So if you grow the government for your purposes and set the precedents of that growth, when you're out of power and the people you don't like are in power, they're going to use your precedents and the government you grew, and they're going to use it against you. Sadly, some conservative groups in Washington, D.C. have decided that the federal government can set about some sort of justly ordered society. Your view of a justly ordered society, I assure you, is completely different from the view of pro-transgender progressives who want a justly ordered society that is going to come after you for not supporting transgenderism. And yet, some of these conservative groups have decided they're going to grow government to justly order society. And you do need to understand, you're not going to hold on to power in this country forever. Short of abandoning this country, short of abandoning the American Republic as it currently exists, which I think is the subtle undercurrent of some of these guys. They're not really fans of the American Republic and would like to seize power and hold power. I wrote a piece in National Review today about this. For decades, the Republican coalition stood united atop the so-called three-legged stool of fiscal conservatism, traditional values, and a peace-through-strength foreign policy. All of these priorities help to combat the spread of communism and to create and maintain prosperity at home. But since the collapse of the Soviet Union, some on the right have questioned these orthodoxies as new challenges have arisen, such as the rising cost of living and the breakdown of many communities as the economy evolves. Some degree of discussion and even reprioritization about what the right's agenda should be is necessary and welcome. But when such thinking fails to heed the lessons of the failure of economic central planning and instead jettison conservatism's longstanding commitment to free markets and limited government, it should be vigorously challenged. Thankfully, new efforts within the conservative movement are doing precisely that, ensuring that Republicans remain committed to free markets and have the policies to address America's most pressing problems in the 21st century. Conservative principles have generated economic success in the past, but today, Bidenomics plagues tens of millions of Americans. It's collapsed real wages, led to out-of-control inflation, and given a special interest-driven governing. But self-appointed populists on the right want to counter Bidenomics with Bidenomics waving a bigger American flag, touting trade wars and multi-billion-dollar wealth transfers to subsidize national industrial policy. They may be correct in some of their diagnoses, but their solutions are wrong. At National Review today, I highlight some of the great organizations out there standing up for clear principles of the right. Americans for Prosperity, that also advertises on the program, is one of them. The Club for Growth Foundation is another one. Mike Pence's New American Solutions Project, it's another one. The Foundation for Research on Equal Opportunity is one. The National Taxpayer Union, the Taxpayer Protection Alliance stand together. And let's not forget the Grover Norquist great group. Americans for Tax Reform. They're not shifting the status quo. And yet on the right these days, there's something, I think they're just bored with the ideas that work. So I got an idea for a book I want to write. It's kind of like Rush Limbaugh's See, I Told You So book back in the day. And it's just the tried and the true and the boring. We know that if the government stops picking winners and losers, the economy thrives. We know one of the problems right now is that we don't really have a free market so much as we have a regulatory entangled Fortune 500 who thrive on government regulations. You get rid of the regulations, their monopolies fall in their respective areas. They provide competition, and they don't like it. We also know that aggressive unionization drives up labor costs, slows down efficiencies, and makes it harder for people to do business. And yet there's this big union growth. Now, what's so notable here, and this hasn't gotten a lot of attention, there's a new media website out there called Notice. And it's got a piece about progressive groups have taken to funding conservative think tanks. One of them is called American Compass. American Compass is run by Orrin Cass. It is purported to be a right-wing think tank. It is almost entirely funded by the left. And guess what this supposed right-wing think tank supports? Government industrial policy, government regulatory approaches, unionization, government mandated higher wages and benefits, everything the left wants. It's very weird how these right-wing think tanks, air quotes there, funded by the left, embraced the left's economic solutions, the old left's economic solutions at that. Elizabeth Warren is even aligning with them on stuff. Should be a red alert to you conservatives out there that there are portions of the right who have gotten bored with the tried and the true, and they want to go out and find something new to sell. And what they're selling are very old, failed left-wing ideas. We know what works. Low regulations and low taxes. No, that doesn't allow the rich to get richer. What allows the rich to get richer is a heavily regulated industrial community where the government through lobbyists are allowed to pick winners and losers. The rich get richer because they hire lobbyists to navigate the regulations in the tax code. You make the regulations of the tax code simple, well, then the poor can compete against the rich and David can slay Goliath. But we on the right, there's groups out there that have forgotten this. So National Review today, I wanted to highlight the groups that haven't forgotten it, that haven't forgotten the fact that limited government is good. Listen, if you're a person of faith, what are we? If you're a person of faith, you believe we live in a fallen world. And if you are a person of faith, you believe that everyone is a sinner. Shouldn't you want as few in charge of you as possible? The new right has forgotten we're all sinners. And the fewer in charge of us, the better it is for all of us. There's not just a theological case, though, for small government. There's a great case just in terms of cost and relatability. A massive government of federal bureaucrats is a disaster. We see it playing out right now with Bidenomics. We need to go back to a smaller government. We can cut the size and scope of the federal government if we have the will to do it, and we need to get back to it. And what some of these think tanks in Washington are doing by this new populist strand of we'll actually take over the government apparatus and we'll build an American our image, forget, is in our nation of 350 million people, you can't do that, but you can set the precedents the left will use against you. And I would prefer not to go down that road. All right. I got to talk about Trump and Mike Johnson. Before I talk about Trump and Mike Johnson, by the way, Trump has come out, if you haven't heard, throwing a big lifeline to Mike Johnson. First, I need to tell you about Vision Computers. Vision Computers wants to build computers for you. If you call them at 404 Computer, go to visioncomputers.com, they can build a computer for you. However, pay attention to me on this one, please. If you've already got a computer, let's say you went to that big box electronics store where you found the buy that you thought was best. Who's going to support that computer? Do you have anyone you can call? Let's say you just went out, you went online and you bought computers for your home or your office. Now you don't know who to call. You got a problem. Well, if you go to visioncomputers.com or you call them at 404 Compute for $179 a year for a company, they will become your tech support. So you can call Vision Computers when you have a problem, when you have an issue, when you don't know how to do something, because who else are you going to call? You got to the one-size-fits-all big box store, or you got the one online, you thought you knew what you were getting, and you're not so sure, you don't know who to call. You can call Vision Computers. They will service your computers. They will take care of you. And if you ever decide you want a new computer, they'll build you one, and they will save you money. If you're in the market for a new computer, before you go anywhere else, go to Vision Computers, 404 Compute. Call them and tell them I sent you, get an even better deal, 404 Compute or visioncomputers.com. If you get their tech support, you can get answers faster than a Google search, and they've got thousands of 5-star reviews at visioncomputers.com. This hour of the program brought to you by First Liberty Building and Loan. Wherever you are nationwide, you buying a building, you building a building, you growing for the future. First Liberty wants to be able to help you. You can reach out to them at firstlibertyga.com. Firstlibertyga.com. Tell them I sent you. See if they might be able to help you. Let me see if I can take Maria's phone call real quick. Maria, welcome to the show.
Hi, Eric.
Hi.
It's so good talking to you. I listen as much as I can. Love your show. Thank you for everything you do.
Thank you.
Here's my question to you. Do you think the left reconciles this whole thing with Israel in their minds because Israelis are mostly white and therefore the oppressors and therefore is not racism?
Yes, that's exactly what it is they believe that the Jews are European colonizers to the Middle East. They remember, you don't have to know anything about history if you're progressive. So they really do believe that in their mind, Israel was established after World War II and a bunch of Jewish Europeans were imported to colonize the territory. Therefore, anything you do to stop them is permissible because they're the oppressive class and they are the colonizer. And because they're the oppressive colonizer, they're bad. It is their entire worldview explained in this. If you understand that, then you understand what we're up against. It is a Marxist ideology about power. I don't say Marxist casually. It actually is. Marxism and postmodernism go hand in hand. The postmodernists were Marxist philosophers, and they believe that the entire world is explained in power dynamics. And the way to restructure power is to use words because words construct reality. Remember, in Marxism, words are powerful things because if you don't embrace the right words, you can be killed. So people are trained through abuse to restructure their vocabulary to conform to the Marxist power structure. All of this is related to what we're seeing right now. It is fundamentally Marxism at play. In fact, yesterday at Columbia University, one of the protesters with a bullhorn declared that the Marxists were now in charge. Literally said that at Columbia yesterday. The Marxists are now in charge. And it shapes their entire worldview. These people are enemies of Western civilization and should be treated as such. When we come back, Donald Trump may be in court today. He has thrown a lifeline to Speaker Mike Johnson in the House of Representatives and probably forestalled Marjorie Taylor Greene's effort to oust the Speaker.